Can you give me your full name, your date of birth, and where you were born?
Lorna Ashby Williams. I was born in Murray, Utah on January the 23rd, 1944.
Tell me about your family. Tell me about your siblings and your parents.
I had an awesome, wonderful mom and dad, and I have an older sister, Dolores, and she's 6 years older than me. And so then it was 6 years between she and I, so that was a long time for my parents. And then I have a younger brother, but he was 4 years younger than I, so we were all kind of the worship children.
Tell me about your relationship with your siblings.
I have a really good relationship with my siblings, and I'm lucky that I still have Dolores to chat with, and she checks on me and takes care of me all the time. My brother passed away a few years ago. We had a really different relationship, Dolores and I versus my brother and I. Dolores was one of those children that was always the perfect child and did everything perfect, and I was always the rebellious child, and so that was but we always got along really well. We always had to work at the house together with our mom, and I remember when we were young, we used to work. Saturdays was a day that you cleaned the house, and when my mom cleaned the house, you really cleaned the house. And after we got through, we would take a 6-ounce Coke and share it between the three of us. So we always had a really good relationship. My brother was 4 years younger than me, and like the adored little boy that I spoiled rotten. So I tease about him being such a spoiled little brat, but I was probably one of the main people that did that to him. So, and we always had a great relationship with one another.
Can you tell me about the relationship you had with your parents?
Oh, I had an awesome relationship with my mom and dad. I actually lived next door to my mom and dad until after they passed away. We shared a really tender time together. My mom and I were always really close. She would have done anything for me. She would help me do anything. My dad was always really hardworking, and he always provided for us to have the best life. I think my dad was raised in a home where they didn't have very much, and he always saw that we had everything. When I was a teenager, we had one of the first brand new trucks and a camper and a brand new boat that matched, and we used to go skiing at least twice a week. We used to go water skiing. My dad was a milkman. He would get up early, like 3 o'clock in the morning, and run his milk route. And he'd often come home like 1 o'clock and unload his truck, and then he would lay down for half an hour and we'd go skiing for the rest of the day. So my mom always would pack us these wonderful, awesome lunches. And so we had a great relationship, and I had lived by my mom's extended family, and I had an aunt who never married, who was just kind of like a fairy godmother to me, and we always had just this really wonderful relationship. And my Aunt Laurel, but my mom and dad, one of the things I most love about my mom is how she allowed me to have that relationship with my aunt. And she never ever questioned it. She always embraced that. And as a mom, I realized that's not an easy thing to do. And I really, really appreciate her for that. So I just could not have had better parents. I was just really blessed with wonderful parents.
Tell me about your childhood house. What did that look like? What did it smell like?
Hot bread. My mom was a wonderful cook, and she made wonderful bread and cinnamon rolls all the time, so our house always smelled wonderful. But when I was very little, I think I was about 6, we lived in a basement house. And it was, just below ground with not very many windows. But our house was always a happy, fun place. We always had lots of fun together. And then we built our house upstairs, and it was just an ordinary 2-bedroom house. And we were just so happy there, you know. It was just a wonderful place. We lived in Granger, and so we actually lived on about 40th South. And my grandma lived on about 3600 South. And so when I was little, I could walk from my mom and dad's house to my grandma's house and never even see a car. No paved streets. We just lived in the country. Everybody knew everybody, and it was just a really wonderful place to live and grow up. So our house was just a house, but it was the place where everybody gathered. As I got older, it was always my house that all of our friends came to. And even though my dad got up early in the morning, we could be making a racket till midnight, and that was still, they were always all welcome. There was always Coke in the fridge and a cheese sandwich. My mom and dad could make everybody a cheese sandwich, so it was a great place to grow up.
What kind of a hairstyle and what kind of like a clothing style do you think you had as a young child into your teens?
When I was little, I always had kind of just hair to my shoulder length. And my sister Dolores had beautiful curly hair, and I had straight hair. So I always got to sleep in curlers that my mom would wrap around her finger and then put bobby pins in. But my mom was always really careful about our hair and make sure it smelled good and it looked good, and she did all those things. I don't know, as I grew up, there was not really a style, you know. As I got in high school, I got kind of nicky about what I wore, but when I was little, it really didn't matter. I can't even remember. I only remember one thing that I had that was a coat that I loved, and it was just a little short coat, and that's really the only thing I really remember about my clothing, you know. It wasn't a big deal. Clothes weren't a thing.
Very cool. Dolores, I think, shared that she had school clothes, she had play clothes,
oh yeah,
she had church clothes.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
You got home from school, and the first thing you did is change from your school clothes to your play clothes, and then on Sunday you had church clothes that were, yeah. And my mom always took meticulous care of our clothes. She always was fanatical about washing, and if there was a spot on something, she always made us aware that, you know, we always looked good, and we always had something fancy and cute for church. It was always kind of a dress-up day that you just got to really have fun. So yeah, and definitely we had 3 sets of clothes. And I remember my mom would if you got something like on your pants, she would take a cloth that she had by her, you know, where she kept the dirty laundry, and she would just wipe it off so she didn't have to wash it. Because she was one of those people that you don't wash your clothes all the time because that wears them out. You know, you got to keep your clothes nice. So she was like that, yeah.
Tell me about, what's the most rebellious thing you did?
I don't know. I can't think of anything really rebellious that I did, but I just wasn't willing to always do everything exactly right. And I can remember, I think now how mean this was, but I would say to my mom, and I'm sorry, I'm not Dolores, because Dolores had, you know, straight A's, everything, and it was like, I just was just me, you know, and so she would never, ever have talked back to my mom or dad. She would never have said a word. And I would, I'd say, that's not fair, I'd say things like that. But I'm sure my mom and dad are going like, where did that come from, They'd never seen that before.
So it sounds like you two were very different.
Very.
But you come from the same cloth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's lots of ways that we're very, very much alike, but still till now, we're very different. Very different. Dolores is, everything always in her house has always been perfect, and she always has everything I love people. I just love people to be around, and the more people around, the more happy I am, and so it's, we're just different. I mean, not that she doesn't love people, but she really is like, almost like a perfectionist, and I'm not. I can't do that. And she's gonna hate that I said that. She's gonna hate with a passion that I said that.
Tell me, as a child, what is something that you were scared of or had fear of and learned to overcome?
I don't know that I've ever overcome it. As a child, like I said, we lived in a small community. We lived close by my grandma, so I had my grandma. I never had a grandpa. My grandpa had both grandpas had passed away, and I only had one grandma. And she died when I was 12, and that was my grandma Susie, and I worshipped her. Then I had two aunts, my Aunt Muriel and Uncle Floyd, and then my Aunt Laurel and my Uncle Wendell. And we were all like, and I remember when I was very little, we used to go on a vacation. I would just cry and be so emotionally upset if I had to leave my grandma. It was like, oh, I was leaving them behind. And I'm still like that when people leave. It's like, oh, I just love things like they are. So I'm not a great person to embrace change. And
I think you and my mom would get along really well. That sounds very familiar.
yeah, it's a kind of a bad habit. But
no, there's a lot of love and compassion, I think.
Yeah, well, I received so much of that from not only my parents, but that extended family. It was just like I just had all the support in the world. And my Aunt Laurel was just always, as I went through my teenage years, you kind of go through that time when you have a tough time with your mom. And I was kind of, it was like, but I always had her. And I learned at a really young age, I think I was probably, I don't think I was older than 12, that I never asked her for things, too many things, because if I would have said, I want that blouse, she would have bought that blouse for me and she would have gone without something. And so to have that kind of people in your life, it just, you look back on I didn't have any friends who had families like that. It was just kind of like, and I think I always realized how blessed I was to have that support and love from my extended family. So, and I do need to stop crying.
Well, I'll try to stop that. You're doing amazing now. So as a teenager or an older child, did you ever feel misunderstood?
I'm sure I did. But I don't really remember that. When I was a senior in high school, we actually had a exchange student from Denmark live with us. And that was a real hard turmoil time in my life. That was really because she came and she was always telling me how much better Denmark was than the United States. And we shared a bedroom and we shared nothing in common. And so it was a real difficult time. And it's kind of like my parents, they're really good friends, had had a student exchange student the year before, and it had just been this wonderful experience. And it wasn't like that for us. It was just a real difficult time. And my mom and dad were so supportive of me, and they would always try and talk me down off the ledge when I was upset about things. And they would point out how Getta felt, but yet I knew they always understood how I felt too. And it made I spent a ton of time living at my Aunt Laurel's during that time. I think I probably slept at my Aunt Laurel's at least a third of the time. And I had a really wonderful friend and so I got through it, but it was a hard time. I didn't so much feel misunderstood as I just had that conflict all the time that was really hard for me, that I wasn't used to. I was not used to conflict. I was not used to that kind of thing. So that was a hard time for me when I grew up. I laugh and I shouldn't say this, but happiest day of my life was when she went home. You know, it was like, yes. That was terrible to say, huh? It was just, you know, when you're a senior in a high school, and little things that I look at now and I think, oh, that's so silly. But right then in my life, it was like, oh, it was just terrible. I thought everything she did, people were judging me, and it was like, you know, now people didn't care what she did and me, but at that time in my life, I didn't feel that way. So it was a hard time for me. And Dolores had just got married. And so I was kind of, you know, going through that. So, but it was a learning experience, and I'm glad that, no, I don't know if I am or not. I don't know if I'm glad I went through that. I would never do that to one of my kids.
But it's safe to say you guys didn't do a foreign exchange?
No. We didn't do the foreign exchange. I remember once that my husband, when he was bishop, said we should it was when they used to have the Native American children come to go to school, and my husband said, maybe we should do that. And I'm like, not in my lifetime. Been there, done that.
No thanks. Tell me what you were like as a student.
I was always a good student. I don't know that I ever had a choice, because I was always expected. I mean, my parents just expected that we did well in school, so I always did well in school. I liked school. My junior high years were hard. You know, those are traditional years when friendships kind of change a bit, and that was really, I don't know that any kid goes through those years that aren't pretty tough, you know. In high school, I actually became friends with people that I hadn't gone to school with before, and I had a really wonderful friend named Sandra that was like my sister, and so that kind of got me through that first transition into high school. But my parents just always expected that we did well in school. I liked school, and I always loved math. I always loved math, and that was always, you know, a fun time for me. But I remember as a little girl, I said my dad was a milkman, so they used to have these black books, and each page had a delivery of where they delivered. And across it would be the day, and then what they delivered, and over here would be the total. And I was always in amazement that my dad could add going crosswise, because he could just do that so fast, and it was like, and so I think I always kind of was fascinated with math from that. And math was what I really loved. And then I was really blessed to have a teacher in junior high school that really taught me the basics. And then I had a great teacher in high school. So I love math, but I always did well in school. Now, when I went to the university, that was different. It was like that kind of, I think I went because I felt like I was expected to go, because Dolores had just graduated from school, you know. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first day that I came to the realization, I was sitting in the student union hall talking to someone, having a donut and a Coke. And a realization hit me, and I was skipping class. And the realization hit me that no one cares if I go to class. I better get my rear end in class because no one cares if I don't go. So that was like my first, growing up, that this has got to be me and not, them, not someone else telling me I have to do it. So anyway, that was a big lesson in my life.
And were you a student at the University of Utah?
Yeah.
What degree did you graduate with?
I actually got a bachelor's, and I always went to school and thought I wanted to be a school teacher. Dolores is a school teacher. I wanted to be a school teacher. And I started my student teaching, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing because I hate this. I mean, I loved kids. I loved to be around them, but give me a couple of 3 hours and I'm like, whoo, I can't do this anymore. And so I actually never ever taught at all, except my student teaching. After I did my student teaching, then I went and took some business classes, and I went to work for an employment office, and I kind of got stuck in HR all my life. So that's what I did, and I loved it. So
that is exciting. I am also at University of Utah.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised I don't have my Go Utes sign out, because we're born and when they just play BYU, in football. Mm-hmm. So I was so excited for BYU to finally not just lose everything, and so I said to my kids, I really won't be sad if BYU wins. And oh my gosh, you can't believe the slack I got for that. It was like, yeah, well, traitor. My neighbor that lives down the street, like 3-4 houses from me, when I first moved in, he said to me, I don't know if I can like you. And I said, Dawn, you can't not like me. Why are you saying that? And he said, because you're a Utah fan. And he was a big BYU fan. So
that rears its head up a lot here in Utah.
Yeah.
I'm originally from California. And
oh, you don't know that rivalry? Yeah. When we lived in Granger, when our kids were young, we always had tickets to the University of Utah basketball, always. And it used to be a big rivalry. On BYU-Utah game, I always used to bake red bread. And we would decorate each other's houses up, not mean-wise, but just fun-wise. And we had so much fun because there was like almost half of our area that was BYU, and half was, not as many of us were Utah, but the Utah ones, we were really very avid, and we were, but it was really fun. That rivalry is really funny. If you can do it and realize it's a game.
Mm-hmm. Some people can't.
Yeah, and then it's not fun when it's like that.
That's okay. We'll leave them alone.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about who your closest friends were in your teenage years?
My closest friend was Sandra. We were just, from the time we were sophomores, we were like sisters. And Sandra came from a family that her mom and her dad both smoked. And she hated the smell of smelling like smoke. So she was at my house probably 80% of the time. And she was like the fanatical kind of person. She used to iron her shoelaces. She was just, everything was always perfect. And we were the very best friends. And she was like a sister. And to my mom and dad, she would walk in our house and open the fridge and get a Coke and never say a word to them. It was just like she was home, And so she was we were, during high school, she was my bud. We were always together. And then when we got out of school, she got married right after we got out of high school and had 3 little girls. And our lives kind of just went, separate ways. But still, she actually passed away a couple of years in a car accident. But to that very day, we could pick up the phone to talk to each other, and it was like, we may not have talked for a year even, and it was like we had talked to each other yesterday. We were just like that. So I know she's my sister in heaven waiting for me.
Did you guys have a favorite activity or thing that you would love to do together?
We just were really involved in school. We used to go to all the football games, all the basketball games, all the fun stuff, you know. We had an extended circle of friends that we did a lot of fun stuff with. And, you know, like teenagers, we always hung out at the Frost Stop. It was a big deal, you know. And one time, I probably shouldn't admit this, but my mom and dad went out of town, and I think I was actually a senior. And my mom and dad went out of town, and my dad said to me, you can drive the car while we're gone. It's okay if you drive the car. And so I said, okay, and I was so excited, and so I drove the car everywhere. We drove to the football game at Olympus and everywhere, you know. We kind of like lived in that car. And when my dad got home, he said, so did you have a good time while we were gone? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, well, did you take the car? And I said, yeah, you said I could. And he said, yeah, but you drove the car 700 miles. And I was like, oh, see, that's the rebellious kind of person I was. So anyway, they were cool about it. My dad was cool about it. He just said, you know, next time, just think a little bit about how far you're going.
How old were you at that time?
I was probably a junior. I had my driver's license, so I could have been, I don't know, a junior or senior, you know, but one of those, you know, that age when you think you're really cool and everything's, you know. Mm-hmm. And like when you had a car, I remember we went to the drive-in movie. We did everything while my parents were gone.
Well, tell me about what was your favorite food as a teenager? Or a favorite snack?
Oh, wow. Probably hamburgers and French fries from the Frost Stop. And, you know, the Frost Stop was where all of the cool kids gathered, and that's where we always went, you know. So it was probably hamburgers and French fries.
If you could go back and relive a day from your teenage years, which day would it be?
I don't know. Now, where I am right now in my life, I may go back to high school, and just before Geta left, I may try, and I don't know. I don't know whether I would have or not, because I would have maybe tried to adjust that friendship, but that's hard to say. I can't think of one. I can't think of anything that happened that I'd go like, oh, I wish I could do that.
Mm-hmm. So maybe not a day, but is there an experience you would love to go back and re-experience?
I don't think so. I don't think there was anything that was that, you know. I don't know.
That's okay. So as a teenager, what meant success in life to you?
Having friends, being accepted, being loved. I think that was having I think at that, especially in that teenager years, it's really important to have a friend that you know is there no matter what. And I think that was it.
Do you feel like you were successful as a teenager?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I was really blessed to have a great friend.
As you look back on your teenage years from today, what advice would you give yourself as a teenager?
Patience. Learn some patience. Be forgiving. When we're teenagers, we're pretty judgmental, and the line is so straight and there's no deviation. And I think I would just say, you know, love your friends for who they are. And all friends are different, and you just have to learn to love what is lovable to you about that person. Because maybe something that you think is so wonderful about that person isn't wonderful to someone else. So we all have characteristics, and I would be a good friend, be a true friend, you know, really. I think that's the key to having a really good friend. You have to learn to be that friend. You have to learn to be there for them too.
It's not just take,
yeah.
It's that give. Yeah, it makes total sense.
Maybe another thing when they're teenagers, learn to let go a little bit. You know, if things aren't working out so well, just be willing to move on a little bit, because I think they really get stuck in that little hole. They get stuck in that. So just, you can move on, because there is a tomorrow, whether you think there is or not, because some days then you don't think it'll never change.
Who had the biggest influence on you going into your 20s?
My family. Probably my family had the greatest influence on me. And when I went to college, I had a bunch of friends. We used to carpool to college, so there were like 6 of us but we were just friends. It was not a big deal, it wasn't like a supportive kind of friend group. So it was probably my family. Sandra had gotten married and had children, and she was still a great influence on me. She and her husband Neil used to always include, I was like their third wheel. I went everywhere with them, so she was still really important in my life at that point. And then I got through that point and got in my 20s, and that was a really hard time for me because everyone was married. All of my friends were married, everyone, had a life, and I didn't. And that was really hard for me. So those were not easy years, but I got when I was 16, I got my first job working at a drugstore, and that was a great experience. I worked with some wonderful people there. It was really, but then in college, at the end, I went to work for a personnel center and got my first real job. From that job, I got a job at a rebar company, and I actually worked there for 20 years. So that was like my extended family, I kind of fit into that groove. My boss was probably 35, he was young and fun, and we just had, and I worked with a ton of fun people. So my job was a really important part of my life then too, and the associations that I had with, and still to this very day, I still have associations with a couple of 3 of those people. So it's really cool.
Kind of in that same vein, but how did your relationship with your parents change as you were going into your 20s?
It really didn't.
No?
No. My parents I lived at home until I got married, and that was when I was 26. And I lived at home all during that time, and I always had a great relationship with my mom and dad. My mom and dad were just the best. You could talk to them, and they were just like my best friends. So it really didn't change. Dolores got married and had a couple of little boys. She had Greg and Rick, and they became my life. Rick and Greg were I did everything with those 2 kids. They were so much fun, so that was, but my relationship with my family didn't really change at all.
It's incredible. Tell me about how you met your husband.
I actually was a pink lady at Cottonwood Hospital, and he worked in X-ray. And I really I think was totally oblivious to it. And one night I would check, being a pink lady, I would check people in, and I had taken this person and I took them down to the lab. And as I walked past the X-ray department, one of the guys that worked with him yelled, "Gail, there she goes." And I'm like, what? And so then later that night, he came and said, "Hey, when you get through, do you want to go get a Coke?" And that's how it started. That's where I met him.
So he initiated. What were some of the things that you noticed in him?
I noticed that, probably one of the first things I noticed, that he was kind. That he was really kind and unpretentious, very down to earth. He'd been married, and I think one of the things I first noticed is that he was such a good father. And I so admired that in him. I thought that was wonderful. It's fun. It was just, he had just lots of wonderful qualities. One of the things I noticed, and I think really, really drew me to him, is he was sad. I could tell he had gone through an ugly divorce, and I noticed that he just kind of sometimes acted like, and I noticed when he was around my family that he just bloomed. It was like he belonged, and he loved it. He really loved it. And so I think that's one of the things that most drew me to him. And when I realized how much one of the ladies that he worked with at the hospital actually said to my dad, she said, "Gail's like a different person since he met Lorna." And I think I sensed that too, and I loved that part of making him happy, being, him having the joy of having my extended family be part of his life. So there were lots of things, but he's just an all-around good guy.
That makes me really happy to hear that it seems like you guys had a really genuine love for each other. Talk to me about what that transition was like, becoming a mother and having children of your own.
It was really hard for me because before we got married, I didn't realize, well, I did realize, but I guess I didn't really get it. But every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we would have 4 kids. I would have 4 kids there. And so that was a real hard, difficult time for me, not because I had them, but because I don't think I was smart enough to realize that I was just their stepmother, and I tried to play that mother role. That's one thing I really regret. If I could go back in my life and relive that, I'd never allow those kids to call me mom. I would always just be Lorna. I would never, because you cannot replace a mom to a child. And I think I thought that I could put that happy family back together. So that was the hardest part for me when we were first married. But it was a really great time because we had Gail took call at the hospital. So he would be gone fair amount, you'd never know when you'd get called out to the hospital. And so I think we learned from the very beginning to really have and enjoy the time that we did have together. And we lived in an apartment, in a little 1-bedroom apartment, and it was just a really wonderful time. It was a really fun time for us, a real growing time when, especially for me, because I'd never been in that kind of situation before. So it was, it's a time I could go back and say, I'd do things a little differently than I did. I think if there was one thing I did, that I loved them too much. I cared too much. Wanted to fix it, and it wasn't something you can fix.
Can you tell me what was one of your proudest moments as a parent?
Oh wow, proud. Today, to look at them and what beautiful people they are and how I can't express how much I love them and how proud I am to be their mom and how much that's such a big joy in my life. I mean, the best parts of my life are to have been a wife and a mom and to see them now, and I'm just so proud of them. I mean, there were lots of proud times, and I think the happiest time of my life with each one of them was the day they were born. And I got to see them, and it was like a special little spirit that you look at and the way I made that thing, and it just, I think about each one of them and that experience when I first laid eyes upon them and how my heart felt and how much I have loved them and cherished them. And even in hard, difficult times, It's never changed. I mean, through my life, and they're the only thing that really matters. That, you know, they're just. I'm just really proud to be their mom. So I couldn't be prouder of them than I am today. I've been proud of them since the day they were born, but I'm really proud of each of them today because they have all grown into wonderful people that I admire. I truly admire them. Oh, now, this is horrible.
You're doing incredible. Do you have a favorite story about your kids when they were teenagers? Or is there maybe a memorable moment?
I have so many stories about my kids as they were teenagers. Probably the child I have least memories of teenagers is Heidi, because she's like Dolores. She was always the child who did everything, got straight A's, did all of those things. But then Jared came along and he was totally not like that. He was just himself. He was Jared. And then Susie came, and Gail and I only ever wanted to have 2 kids. It was always, we had always decided. And then Susie came along as this big, huge surprise to us. And she was the most delightful baby and little child. She loved everyone, and everyone loved her. I still have a calendar in my closet that my Aunt Muriel had made when she was probably 3. And it says, "I belong to everybody." And that's how she was. She was delightful. And then we found out we were going to have Brian, and it was like, whoa, that was really a surprise to us. But then he came along, and he just was the perfect caboose, the perfect and the perfect making our family, you know. And it's just been an absolute, I mean, being a mom is just the most wonderful part in the whole world.
What sacrifices did you make in your personal or social life in being a parent and growing, helping your children grow up?
The sacrifice I made in my own life always was with my stepchildren, because I had hefty child support to pay, and so I consequently worked my whole life. But I was so blessed because I had wonderful jobs and I had wonderful bosses. And there was never a time in my life when I couldn't have left work whenever I needed to. And my kids always could call me, and it was, and I think I did a really good job of being a working mom and still being a hands-on mom with my kids. But that was a real sacrifice to me, because I would have loved to have just been stay-at-home mom and made bread every day and had fun, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's the sacrifice I made, but it's fine, you know. Yeah. It's part of life. It was just a decision that actually Gail, after we had Heidi, we sat down and financially said, okay, the truth is, he's either going to, Gail either needs to have 2 jobs or I've got to work. And I decided I didn't want the 2-job thing. I didn't want to be a mom alone all the time. So it wasn't a horrible thing for me, but that was a sacrifice I felt like I made.
Well, let's shift to your relationship with your husband.
Okay.
As your kids were growing up, what did that look like?
It was great. I think we were a really good team. Gail was always more like with discipline of our kids and stuff. He would only get involved if it was big stuff. And then sometimes he was raised in a very disciplined, not like I was. And so sometimes when he'd get involved, I would say, hold on. I'm tough enough on these kids, you know. I'm tough enough on these kids, you don't have to be. But we were, when Gal and I got married, we're so freaking madly in love. We were both lonely. We were both at a point in our lives where we needed that relationship. And we had a lot of fun. We had fun with our kids. When our kids were little, you know, I remember we did everything with them. We went to games with them. We always went to the university games. When they were little, we rode motorbikes together and camped out and did all that stuff. And then as they got older, we did snowmobiles and we had a great relationship with one another. That's a part of my life that is really tender to my heart, because actually the last 17 years Gail was alive, he had Parkinson's disease. And that so changed him personality-wise, everything about him. And I feel badly because I don't want my kids to remember that part of our life. I want them to remember the other part before he was sick and had that disease, and you know. And so that kind of is one thing I really hope my kids are able just to take that part and say, it happened and it was crappy and it was hard. It was so hard on my kids. You know, it was hard on me, but it's so hard on my kids. And I don't want them to remember mom and dad as that, you know, because Gail and I were really happy and we had a great life together, and something I'm extremely thankful for.
Can you tell me about the relationship that your kids had with Gail?
I think my oldest daughter was always really close to Gail, and she was, even to when he passed away, she would make sure that she went there all the time. Jared and his dad were always really close. It was really hard for Jared. In fact, I remember him openly saying to me, I can't stand to watch Dad. I can't stand to watch him suffer like that. And I remember being tough on him and saying, well, you think I enjoy it, you know, but it was hard. Susie and her dad were a little bit more, would butt heads with one another. And I think Brian had a really good relationship. I think they all had a good relationship. Probably Jared and his dad. I mean, Jared's more like Gail, like if something's broken, Jared will always try and fix it, when Gail could fix anything. You know, he could fix anything. So I think they had more of that but that may have just been the years. They had longer together to learn from each other, you know. But I think they all had a really good relationship with their dad.
What lesson did you learn during parenthood and raising kids that you wish you would have known earlier?
Some things aren't worth fighting about. They just aren't. And I guess I learned that when I was older, but not when my kids were younger. I remember my mom, and I told you at the beginning, my mom was always really, everything was perfect. And my mom said to me when Jared was, I think he was probably 18, 19, and she said to me, I can't believe you let him keep his room like that. And I just said, it's what doors are for, Mom. And I wish I'd have. But I'm still a kid like that. 14-year-old who lives with me, and I just had a ride with him yesterday about his room. So, but yeah, some things aren't worth fighting about. A lot of things.
What is the most significant thing you've learned about yourself in the last 10 or 15 years?
I guess that I'm a survivor. I guess that I've learned that not bad, but negative things can happen to you, and it doesn't have to dictate the rest of your life. It can just be, you know, you can let things go. You can forget and forgive.
That's a good one. That one's really important. What do you think is the most meaningful tradition that you've passed on to your children or grandchildren?
Christmas Eve.
Yeah?
Christmas Eve, we always have Santa, and I have Dolores and all of her kids and great-grandkids. We had like 45 for Christmas Eve this year. And Easter. Easter is our other big holiday. My girls buy so much candy. It's like my neighbor laughs and says it looks like we have the Walmart candy store on our lawn. And so those are both days when those are both holidays when all of Dolores's kids and her grandkids and great-grandkids come. And I think it's like when I send out the invitation for Christmas Eve, and I get back all these, I'm coming, Lorna, I'm coming, Lorna, I'm coming, Lorna, and it's like, it's not hard, it's not easy for these kids. I know they have lots of other things, and they all have tiny little kids but they love this tradition, and I love Easter and Christmas. Those are my favorite. And we always do a summer vacation. We always go to Bear Lake in August. And usually we do something else, a couple of things, but just times when I love it, like Christmas time this year on Christmas Day, like we flew out Christmas night, and my son Brian has a home in Arizona. We went to his and Katie's house, and all of my kids and grandkids went, and I just love it when we're just all together. That's just my favorite. It doesn't have to be a special day, just when we're all together and we're enjoying each other.
Do you have a favorite memory with your grandchildren?
Oh, just having them. I'll never forget the day that Bauer was born. I mean, he's 18 years old now, and that was my first grandchild. And I'll never forget how I felt when I saw him. And then it's the same with Cash and Knox. I actually got to see Cash be born. And that was just an amazing experience for a grandma. My little Noxie. I mean, we tried a long time to get another baby, and when he came, it was just, and those three little boys are totally the light of my life. I just love them so much. They're so cool. They're just the best little kids in the world. I don't know. It's just having them. They're the best. That's the biggest. I mean, I don't have any words to describe being a grandma. It's just the best job I ever had. Oh, wow. This is crazy. My little boys are so much the joy of my life. My little Bauer's gonna go away to college, and I'm gonna die. Because Bauer and his friends will come here at night, and I love it. And it's just, I love being a grandma. It's hard for me now because Cash actually lives with me, so I don't feel like I'm able to really be a really good grandma to him, because I sometimes have to be mom, and that's hard for me. I wish that I just didn't ever have to correct him, that I just had to just love him and play with him, you know, and laugh when they tell me he does things wrong. But anyway, it's the best job. They're the joy of my life, and they're all three so kind and so loving to me, and when they hug me and love me, it's the best thing in the world. That's not where it was supposed to end, huh? I'm not supposed to cry like that.
I want to nail this. I came with a whole bunch of different questions, so I'm just reading through to...
Okay, so I'll tell you something, and then you can edit it, okay? I just recently got diagnosed that I have some cancer cells in my blood. And so after that happened, of course, I talked to each of my kids, and then I decided that I needed to talk to my grandkids because I didn't want them to find out from someone else that I was sick. And I can't even begin to explain to you the experience I had with those three little boys, each individually, as I was able to tell them how much I love them and how wonderful they blessed my life and how happy they made me, and that they were each able to express their love back to me. It was, I mean, it sounds morbid and it sounds terrible, but it was actually just a wonderful time for each of us. Little Bauer and I talked, and he's 18 years old and he's sobbing his guts out and his shirt's covered with, and I'm telling him, this is the best part of my life, you know. I mean, Bauer and I have done everything together because I had him for so long. My other two little boys said to me, Bauer's your favorite, Grandma. And I said, no, he's not my favorite. I said, I've just had Bauer longer to love, but he's not my favorite. And they said, yeah, he's your favorite. And I said, who told you that? And they said, Bauer. And so Bauer and I got to share that time together and express our love to each other. And I just told him, you know, I'm the luckiest grandma in the world. I got to love you for 18 years. And then I had a talk with Cash, and it was so sweet and tender. And I knew how hard it was for him because he's here. And so, but he was just so sweet. And then Knox came, and they were just the tenderest moments that we got to touch our hearts together. And I'm so grateful that happened to me. I'm so grateful I got to do that, because lots of people die and they don't get to say those things to one another. And I should have done that with my kids. I should have just done that tender thing with my kids, but I didn't. But I did with my grandkids, and I'm really grateful that I shared that time with them and that they shared with me. You know, it was, because I look at, you know, it's just like I said to some of them as I talked to them, I've got to be your grandma for all this time. And sometimes, just like you said about your mother-in-law, people aren't blessed to get to be grandmas for very long, you know. So it was a tender, sweet time that I'll never forget with my little boys. They're just a part of my life that I will always love. And there's a piece of my heart that I have some real estate that belongs just to them. So, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, that's okay. This is so tender.
Yeah, it was tender. It was really tender.
It's very clear that you have a lot of love for your family. I know that they see that too. And you're just an incredible.
They're pretty incredible kids. They're pretty, you know, I mean, I just look, I sometimes, you know, like, I remember when Bauer was getting baptized, and I told him, and I can remember vividly, I was driving to pick up eclairs for his party. And I thought, this is so unfair that Gail doesn't get to share this. This is just, but I do, you know, so maybe if I just enjoy it twice, then hopefully he can enjoy it too.
Yeah, that's a very familiar feeling as well.
They what? Okay, so
my father-in-law has, and my wife feels life is just cruel and it doesn't always make sense.
It doesn't, and you look at it and you think, why, you know, but I guess someday we'll see the whole picture, huh?
Yeah. Hope for that day.
Yeah.
Try to make sense of it all. Let's see, I'll wrap it up with just a few more questions.
Okay, all right, come on, it's 2:30, we gotta quit this.
What is something that you wish your family understood about your life growing up that you've never fully explained?
Well, I don't know if I haven't fully explained it, but I just hope they realize how much love I've had in my life. I've had it from the day I was born. When I was a little girl, I always knew I was adored and loved, and I still know it today. And that's a beautiful thing. And I hope they know that, but I don't know that I've ever expressed that. And I hope, more than anything, I hope that's how each of them feel. That they feel that they're loved and cherished, because they are.
What do you want your legacy to be your life at the end? It's a little morbid. I apologize.
Legacy.
Let me rephrase that. What does your life's legacy mean to you?
I just hope I'm remembered for being kind and loving and making people's life happier and not sadder and more fun, you know. I hope people remember how much fun I've had with them, how much I enjoy them. I hope people know how much I love them. That's what I hope.
One more question, and then a question that's not really a question, but this is morbid, so I apologize. But tomorrow...
You just want to see me cry again, right?
I don't enjoy that. Let's just say that tomorrow we found out was going to be your last day. What message would you want to leave your family?
Just that I love them. I love them and I'm proud of the people they are. That's it.
Okay.
I guess, no, I'd want them to love each other. Please. No fighting.
That's a good one. And then the last one is an optional question, but would you care to share your testimony?
I would love to. I would love to share my testimony because I feel guilty that I don't share that enough with my kids or my family. But I am so thankful for the richness of my life. I'm thankful for the blessings that I have. I am thankful for each of my family, individually and collectively. I'm really thankful to my Heavenly Father that He was willing to let His Son come to this earth, that He would watch Him as He was persecuted and suffered, and I'm thankful that He was willing to let Him do that. I'm thankful to the Savior. I'm thankful for His life. I'm thankful for His teachings, for His example. I'm really thankful that I'm able to repent of those things that I do all the time. And I'm really, really, really thankful that I'm able to be forgiven of my sins. I'm thankful for my beautiful family. That's it.